Hello everyone, Jay Warden here, and welcome to my recap and review of the episode Conspiracy, a very entertaining, if flawed episode involving parasitical alien bugs and an exploding head. What more could you want from peace-loving Star Trek? Don't forget those spoilers, otherwise, enjoy. The Enterprise is on its way to a lovely tropical beach planet, and whilst Data laughs hilariously at one of LaForge's jokes, they receive a Code 47, a Starfleet emergency frequency to be used only in dire circumstances for the captain's eyes alone. It appears to be an old friend of Picard's, Captain Walker Keel, and he demands to see Picard in person immediately and to not trust anyone before cutting off the call abruptly. On the bridge, Picard orders LaForge to set a course and tells everyone that there must be no record of this diversion taking place, hoping the delay to their original mission will be minimal before secluding himself in his ready room, much to the bewilderment of everyone else. Riker tries to find out what's so interesting about this new destination from Data, but it's nothing more than
a lifeless hunk of rock, a useless ball of mud, a worthless chunk of activated.
Once they arrive, they find 3 other Federation ships already in orbit, but despite Worf attempting to contact them, receive no response, so Picard beams down alone to meet Keel as requested. Once on the default planet studio set, Picard is confronted by Keel and 2 other captains who point phasers at him. Keel starts asking him some personal questions, but keeps trying to trip him up with wrong information, with Picard consistently correcting him before demanding to know what the fuck this is all about. The others lower their phasers and Keel apologises before explaining that something is very wrong within the Federation, with odd and irrational orders being given, not to mention there have been several unexplained deaths of important high-ranking officials, and they think the Enterprise will be targeted next. Picard is reluctant to believe all of this, but Keel insists that something is terribly wrong with some of Starfleet's top commanders. Apparently though, their weakness is a lack of memory, because they keep bluffing their way through talks of old times rather than answering any questions directly. Picard continues to be skeptical, but Keel insists to keep his eyes open and to stay covertly in contact as a personal favour to him, so he agrees and heads back to the ship. Back on board, he tells the ship to resume its original course and gets Data to do a full analysis of the last several months of various Starfleet orders and activity to see if there are indeed any suspicious shenanigans going on. As they continue on course, Worf reports picking up a disturbance of some kind nearby, so they take the ship to investigate and upon arrival find a large debris field. An analysis finds it's the remains of Captain Keel's ship, the USS Horatio. With the loss of his close friend, Picard now fully believes there may indeed be a cancer growing at the heart of the Federation, so lets Riker in on his suspicions, reminding us of that time when Admiral Quinn came aboard the ship warning him that something might be very wrong, hence the previous investigation into him. Riker remains very skeptical that something like this could be happening until Data walks in and reports on his findings, that everything points to a clandestine takeover of key positions and sectors of the Federation, but with no clues as to who could be behind it, so Data suggests they just fly on over to Earth and ask directly what the fuck is going on. So Picard says why not, and they boldly go back home to the heart of the Federation and updates everyone else on the situation. Immediately they arrive at Earth, because the plot doesn't have time for us to take weeks to get back, and eventually make contact with Starfleet Admirals Savar, Aaron and Quinn. They welcome them home but are puzzled at the timing of their visit, to which Picard says he'd like to come down and discuss it in person. Before they answer, another familiar face enters the picture, and it's that twat Remick, who interrogated everyone a few episodes ago. They cut off the transmission briefly, leaving everyone a little suspicious, with Troi doing her best to be unhelpful by sensing that someone is hiding something. Eventually they re-establish contact and say they'd be delighted to entertain both Picard and Riker at dinner, whilst Quinn says he'd like to come on board and personally say hello. Picard looks forward to it, and knowing that Quinn wants to talk in private, is relieved to think that he's still on their side. However, in a darkened room at Starfleet HQ, a figure walks in with a briefcase, which shows some ugly-ass fake rubber cockroach, and it seems the figure is Quinn, and is also joined by Remick. Once on board, Picard welcomes him and asks what's going on, but Quinn deflects the question and says his concerns a few episodes ago were merely the result of his concerns about assimilating new races into the Federation, before saying he needs to freshen up first before going on a tour of the ship. Picard says Riker will see to his needs before telling Riker in private that whoever that is, it's not the Quinn he knows, and tells him to find a way to have Dr. Beverly do an examination on him. He then tells him to join him on the surface when he's finished and then beams himself down. So Riker goes to see Quinn in his quarters to give him a tour when he notices the briefcase and wants to know what's inside. Quinn says it's a superior form of life they discovered, and though he wanted Dr. Beverly to see it first, he says it much prefers Riker, and the 2 obvious stunt doubles proceed to have a fight. Riker calls for security, but his counterattacks have no effect on Super Quinn and gets knocked unconscious for his troubles. Meanwhile on the surface, Savar, Aaron and Remick are waiting for him, and while Remick goes off to see about their dinner, the Admirals have a quick chat about the fate of the Horatio, which Savar says imploded due to the extreme negligence of her captain, and both Admirals seem to be acting in a rather suspicious and sinister manner. Back on the ship, Worf and LaForge rush to the Admiral's quarters, and once they arrive, Quinn attacks LaForge by smashing him through the doors and gives Worf a chance to show off his warrior prowess, but predictably gets his ass kicked for the 3rd time this season. Just as Quinn is about to press his attack, Dr. Beverly arrives and after repeatedly shooting her phaser, finally knocks him out. As Dr. Beverly makes sure everyone is okay, they take Quinn to sickbay to examine him and find some creepy looking protrusion coming from the back of his neck. On the surface, Picard continues his chat with the sinister admirals when Remick tells him dinner is served. Before heading in, he checks in quickly with the Enterprise and gets an update on what's going on, where Dr. Beverly explains that Quinn has been taken over by a parasitic being called the Goa'uld, that's controlling his actions and giving him great strength and being generally evil. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong TV show. Remick then pops out and reminds him his dinner's going cold, so he tells her to send Riker down ASAP and joins the admirals at the table. However, his dinner doesn't turn out to be very appetizing, and as he backs off, Riker walks in and forces him back, claiming that Picard will soon be one of them, and it seems Riker has been taken over by the parasite that Quinn was carrying earlier, as the gill on the back of his neck proves. Then, as one of the captains who we met at the start of the episode walks in, we finally hear of the aliens' dastardly plan to take over and subvert the Federation for their own ends. They encourage Riker to tuck into his meal, but just as he's about to take a mouthful of wriggling grubs, he pulls out a phaser and starts firing, causing an awkward looking fight to break out. After disabling everyone and avoiding some really slow phaser beams, one of the parasites exits in stop motion footage from Aeron's mouth, entering a nearby room. They follow and find Remick in a chair, staring at a map of the galaxy sending some sort of transmission. He turns to face them, eats up the little parasite, and his neck starts bulging in a grotesque way, saying that they mean no harm and only seek peaceful coexistence in an evil and sinister tone. Picard and Riker respond by shooting him in the face, and in one of the best scenes ever, Remick's head violently explodes. With Remick now very dead, his chest starts melting and the cutest little alien hand puppet pops out before itself getting phasered to death. Jesus, when the fuck did Star Trek turn into an alien movie? I'm half expecting Ripley to jump out at any moment. With the Federation saved and Quinn fully recovered, Picard muses on what a shame it was to have to destroy life given they're usually in the business of respecting it, while Riker explains the ruse he and Dr. Beverly came up with to trick the aliens and Picard into accepting him at the dinner table. Data comes in and reports that the message Remick was sending was sent to a remote corner of the galaxy and appears to be some sort of homing beacon, and as everyone looks on ominously, the Enterprise flies off while we zoom in on a remote nebula with the creepy sounding signal being played. Okay, I've been looking forward to this one. It's probably one of the most standout episodes of the whole season for me, and despite some flaws in its pacing and the plot, even with analysis mode on, I still really enjoy it, and not just for head-exploding reasons. It's got everything. It's got intrigue, some good character moments, cheesy but fun action, a scary parasitical alien species, conceptually speaking anyway, and of course an exploding head, along with some over-the-top but very un-Star Trek-like gore. Now, you might say this episode isn't very Star Trek, or at least not in keeping with the theme of Star Trek as a whole. But aside from the gratuitous exploding head and gore at the end, I'd argue that there are several TOS episodes that act more like a sci-fi horror show than many would like to admit. Remember that horrific looking creature that drained your body of salt in The Man Trap? The serial killing energy creature in Wolf in the Fold? Or maybe the parasitic flying jelly aliens in Operation Annihilate? An episode which is probably the most similar to this one in concept. And don't forget, this episode happened while Gene Roddenberry was still very much in charge at the time, so he signed off on this. That's not to say that there wasn't some backlash behind the scenes here. Season 1 showrunner Maurice Hurley was very critical of the script written by Tracy Torme due to its dark, violent nature and felt it violated the rules set down by Roddenberry regarding his vision of what Star Trek should be, and led to a bad working relationship between him and Torme going forward. Despite his objections though, someone clearly loved it and overruled him, and I think that was a wise choice. Apparently the script only had a couple of minor modifications, primarily that it couldn't just be a regular old conspiracy involving human officers, because that went too far in violating the rules of our evolved peace-loving humans of the future, so the parasites were introduced instead to explain this. The closest we actually ever come to again regarding a conspiracy in the ranks of Starfleet is in The Undiscovered Country to prevent peace with the Klingons, and in the DS9 two-parter involving an actual coup attempt within the Federation because of the fear and paranoia caused by the threat of the Dominion. Another interesting tidbit of info here is that these parasites were the progenitor idea of the Borg, and were meant to be the introduction to that threat. But because of budgetary reasons of portraying a parasitical bug-like species of this nature, the Borg evolved instead into a separate foe, the relentless cyborgs bent on assimilating everyone into their collective, becoming the most feared and well-known foes in all of Star Trek. Until Voyager ruined them anyway, but that's a topic for another time. In any case, we sadly never hear or see from these parasites again on screen and are only referred to again in books, and that's a real shame on one hand, but on the other hand it leaves the mystery open and some things are just better left a mystery. Incidentally, I thought these parasites share a lot in common with the Goa'uld over in Stargate SG-1, though that didn't come until years later, so I guess in some way we got to see the kind of havoc such creatures could bring. Anyway, let's take a closer look at the episode itself, and I'll first continue with the parasites. Visually speaking, they're a combination of adorably cheesy and creepy. The brief moments we do see the cockroach-like bugs themselves, it's very obvious it's just a pink rubber prop, and the chest-bursting like alien in Remick is clearly just a hand puppet. There's also some awkward-looking stop-motion footage used in the bug moving across the floor, but the little thorn popping out the back of an infected person's neck and the way it moves about is a creepy visual, as well as the pulsating neck bulging on Remick at the end, and the effects of the exploding head and the gory remains of Remick's torso are pretty well done. As far as their strategy goes, it seems to be all going quite well, having spent many months on infiltrating the highest ranks of Starfleet Command and slowly moving their pieces into place. But then for no reason at all they start sabotaging themselves, leading to the ousting, all thanks to Quinn. Why does the infected Quinn go out of his way to show Riker what's in the briefcase, and then become very aggressive, beating everyone up rather than trying to maintain his cover? It's only because of his actions do the crew even discover the presence of these parasites in the first place, and from then on their entire plan collapses because Riker pulls a fast one and saves Picard from being co-opted himself. Although the events of this episode were set up previously in Coming of Age, where we first met both Quinn and Remick, I guess this whole plot arc could have been done better if it was done over 2 or 3 more episodes, because really in the end, after a long and careful setup, it's quickly and easily upended within the constraints of a 40-minute episode, and so it loses some impact of what could have been a much cooler story arc. For example, the first 20 minutes are really well done. Suspense is built up with the initial clandestine meeting of the other captains, then the sudden death of Keel, discussing his concerns with the crew, and Data finding the patterns of behaviour in Starfleet that show attempts to control key sectors of the Federation. But then suddenly at the snap of our fingers we're at Earth, we're meeting the Admiralty, they reveal their plan in a James Bond villain kind of way, and completely sabotage themselves thanks to Quinn. I also wonder, was Remick always the mother parasite? Was he already infected back in Coming of Age? Why did it choose Remick in the end? More questions we'll never really have answers to, sadly. The scene with Quinn beating the crap out of everyone was quite amusing as Riker tries some awkward kicks to this old man's face before clearly switching to a shot of stunt doubles doing the fighting. Worf of course gets his ass kicked again, and Geordi is hilariously thrown straight through the doors, clearly made of polystyrene or something, and yet in universe for Quinn to have enough strength to smash him straight through presumably doors made of metal really should have killed Geordi, I think. Instead he just gets up and shakes it off while Riker remains unconscious from being smashed through a glass table. My other nitpick here is when Riker calls for a security backup, Worf comes along, which is fine as he's chief of security now since the death of Yar, and Geordi. But since when was Geordi in security? Why is Worf not bringing along half a dozen gold shirts? I guess Yar would be proud of continuing her own general incompetence as chief of security. Character-wise, Picard gets some good stuff here in the beginning as he chats with his old friend, with again brief mentions of Jack Crusher, further alluding to the relationship Picard had with Dr. Crusher's former husband. I like how skeptical Picard is initially about all this talk of conspiracy, but finally takes it seriously when Keel is killed. Picard and Riker also get to team up again to save the day, as they did in the episode with the Binars. Data gets an amusing moment with the computer as he's doing his investigating, where as he starts to babble and explain something, even the computer tells him to shut up, causing some great facial expressions from Brent Spiner. Also notice once again we see this image. I first noticed this in The Naked Now, and it's popped up a couple of times in other episodes that require some file scanning, so I did a bit of digging on this. It's basically a bird's body with Gene Roddenberry's head attached wearing a Starfleet uniform, and is referred to as the Great Bird of the Galaxy, which was apparently a nickname given to him by an associate producer over on TOS back in the day. I don't think there's much else to say here, except I wish this had been the season finale instead of the neutral zone. It would have helped the show end on a bigger bang and potential mystery to follow up on, as we hear the mysterious signal sent out by the parasites into deep space, suggesting they may one day return. So overall, a flawed but wonderfully entertaining episode that probably ranks as one of my favourites of the whole season. Next time, it's the season finale as the crew investigate disappearing outposts in the Romulan neutral zone, and Data finds some frozen people from the 20th century on a derelict satellite in the episode, The Neutral Zone. Please feel free to leave any comments or feedback, and if you like this episode then please do like, subscribe and share. This has been Jay Warden, signing off.